Welcome to the Becoming Superhuman podcast, where we interview extraordinary people to bring you the skills and strategies to overcome the impossible. And now, here's your host, Jonathan Levy.
Greetings, super friends, and welcome to this week's show. You guys, before we get started, I want to read you an awesome review from Myron KY from Brazil. Quote, made my 2016. If I had to choose what made my 2016 a significant year, I would have to say it was the Becoming Superhuman podcast. I listened to it doing my daily workout, and I can confidently say that it changed my life. I'm a different woman, a superwoman. She then says a bunch of stuff in Portuguese. Para los brasileiros. I'm not going to read this whole thing and embarrass myself, but thank you so much, Marin, for that incredible review. I'm glad it made your 2016. It definitely made my week. So thank you for that. On to today's show. You guys, I'm going to level with you, okay? I've had some pretty interesting explorations this year, 2016, around chi, energy healing, and just the unknown. And today we're going to take a really deep dive into that, and we're really going to explore the outer reaches of that word, superhuman. And honestly, guys, I'm not sure what to make of this, okay? So we're joined by Yolanda Williams of Yuchi Wellness. She's a Reiki master teacher, an educator, a speaker, all that good stuff. If you guys don't know about Reiki, well, we're going to get into that in this episode, but basically it's a form of, and stay with me here, energy healing. But guys, here's where things get really, really interesting, because before the interview, Yolanda actually offered me a Reiki healing session, which I was super happy to accept. So far, so good, right? But here's where things get really spooky. The Reiki session was performed remotely over a span of 7,500 miles without Yolanda and I ever actually speaking. So what's more interesting than that is Yolanda's assessments were actually shockingly accurate, too accurate to be cold reading, in fact. So I had to get to the bottom of this. I had to talk to her. I had to figure out what the heck was going on. To be honest, I went into the conversation pretty sure that I was going to have to end it with, listen, this is total woo-woo. I can't handle this. I can't do this. And yet we hit it off. And she makes some really incredible arguments that I think might have convinced me, but I'm not sure. So listen to this conversation. Keep an open mind, as I did, because there are a lot of things that we don't know and we don't understand. And even if you think it's total woo-woo, you're going to be super entertained by this episode. I think it's probably the most unique one we've ever done. And you might just learn something. You might just come away inspired. It might just calm you down. I certainly learned a lot. And, well, just listen to it and let me know what you guys think. So without any further ado, let me present to you Yolanda Williams. Yolanda, welcome. Welcome. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well. Thank you. And thank you for having me.
A pleasure. So this is a bit interesting because in some sense, I kind of feel like you already know me pretty well. And I want to get into that in a little bit. I've got a lot of questions. But first, maybe tell me a bit about yourself so I don't feel like we're on such an uneven playing field.
Oh, okay. So, well, I live in San Diego, California. And as you know, I practice energy work, very specifically Reiki. And this has been an interesting journey for me. I mean, this isn't something I grew up with, and it's definitely not how my personal path started. I used to work in corporate. I worked for an international bank, and it was one of those spaces in life where I had to make a decision of either relocating to keep my job or taking a layoff package, and I opted to do that. And so I found myself in a space of anxiety and having panic attacks and all of this stress around what to do with my life. And that's how I ended up here in this field of energy healing and meditation and things like that. So I wasn't always, this energy healing yogi woo-woo type of person, but yeah, that's really what led me here. It was just a change in direction in my life and trying to find ways to help alleviate stress and anxiety.
Incredible. Awesome. So I'm glad that you used the term woo-woo before me, because I'm going to remind you that you described this as woo-woo. Because this feels like I'm all into energies. And this year I've been taught, I should say, a lot about this idea that there's energies and stuff like that. But I have to say, we're now getting it like pretty woo-woo-y for me. So I'm excited about it. I'm going to expand my comfort zone today. Let me ask you this first, though. You mentioned the term Reiki, and I'm not sure everyone in our audience knows what that means. So what exactly is Reiki, and how's it defined, and what is it used for?
Okay, so Reiki is a Japanese form of energy healing. People think of it as energy healing specifically, but the word itself, it's almost like the way we would think of a compound word. So Rei means spirit or higher power, and Ki is the same as, the Chinese version of Qi, or, in India they call it prana. So it's basically our life force. So when you have the word together, it's loosely translated as spiritually guided life force energy. And it is this technique that we use to help alleviate stress, and it really promotes relaxation, and a lot of people use it to alleviate physical pain. And it's based on the idea that this unseen life force energy that flows through us is what causes us to be alive, just like many traditions far beyond, Reiki coming about. Many cultures had the same thought or, idea or school of thought. So even in Indian tradition, and that's over 5,000 years old, and they talked about prana, and in Chinese medicine, again, very old, they talk about qi. And it's all about coming into balance with our life force energy to create more harmony within our being. And so that's what Reiki is. It's a technique to help us come back into energetic balance.
I dig it. I totally dig it. So typically, is Reiki done with the laying of hands, or am I thinking of something else?
It can be, yes. So, I'm glad you brought that up. So there are different levels to Reiki. Personally, I've studied with 6 different Reiki master teachers. And if you look up Reiki, there are different styles of Reiki. And so there's a particular style that I studied called Jikiden Reiki, and it's very traditional. It sticks to the original teachings of Reiki. But then Reiki has also been westernized in a lot of ways. So there are Western practices of Reiki as well. And in the Western style, there are 3 levels. So we have level 1, where you learn the history of Reiki and foundational practices and the laying of hands. And that's how the energy is exchanged between us through the laying of hands. Then in Reiki level 2, you learn how to do Reiki from a distance, like the experience you and I had together. And in the 3rd level of Reiki, which is called master level, is where you learn to attune other people to Reiki.
Okay, so this is very interesting. I do have to ask, the science geek in me has to ask, there's been a tons and tons of research on meditation, to the point where people are now like, yes, it does increase cortical density by X, Y, and Z. Has research been done on Reiki itself?
Yeah. So actually, one of my teachers, his name is William Lee Rand, and he founded the International Center for Reiki Training here in the United States, but he teaches internationally. But he started a Center for Reiki Research, and there have been studies and research being done. But what's interesting about energy work, as you can imagine, it's really unpredictable. And a lot of times with science, it's like you need these controlled circumstances to prove the same results again and again. And quite honestly, even from what I've learned through practice, no 2 sessions are the same, and not even with the same person. So it's a very interesting thing. And I was thinking about talking to you today and how excited I was that we could have this conversation, because I think the only way for all of us to learn more about ourselves and how we work in this energetic component of what and who we are is through sharing our experiences with it. You know what I mean? Because I don't know how you can really they do study it. And like I said, the research that's been done has been done because Reiki is now offered in some hospitals. A lot of oncology departments offer it to help alleviate pain and relaxation for patients. It's also commonly offered now in hospice care for the same reason, to help alleviate pain and help people feel, peace and relaxation. So studies have been done in that, you may look at what people's symptoms are and what they're feeling and then comparing, how they feel afterward. But again, it's not something that is going to be exact session-wise over and over again.
Yeah. I definitely, like I said, I've had some really intense experiences that have helped me kind of understand and logically I can process the fact that, all matter is made of energy. Right. And so it's logical to assume that things can influence energy, and you can explain this away scientifically in 100 different ways and say, you know, when someone is angry, their heart rate accelerates, and that's a change in energy as well, observably. Right. So that's really interesting. Tell me a little bit more about how you came to learn it. You studied with 6 different masters. This sounds like a very intense process.
Well, I will say this. It's not necessary to train with 6 different people, but I was skeptical. Okay, so imagine, I am going through this anxiety. I'm very, not connected at all to this woo-woo stuff. And 10 years prior to me even hearing about Reiki, I had an astrology reading where I had my chart done and the woman did tarot for me. And she was so accurate that it scared me. And I didn't contact this woman for 10 years.
Wow.
So fast forward 10 years later, I find myself on my bedroom floor, literally in tears, crying, begging the universe, please, just give me direction, help me. I didn't know what I wanted to do with my life. And I had to make a decision. I just couldn't not do anything, So I'm literally on the floor praying, crying, asking for just help and guidance. And all of a sudden, this strange calm just came over me. And it was like the anxiety melted away. And I had this moment of clarity. And this woman popped in my mind. So I contacted her. I trusted that. And I went back to her for another reading. And in that, she spoke to me about me being a healer and all of these strange things. And I thought she was crazy, quite honestly. But she recommended that I start meditation and go get a Reiki session to help me with my stress level and to help me to gain some clarity. So that day I signed up for meditation, which I had never done prior. And I started reading about Reiki. And because it was so out there, it sounded interesting to me. I signed up for a class instead of taking a session. So in my first Reiki class, I really became aware of how tangible energy can be, which was, absolutely amazing to me, to say the least. And I learned a lot from my first teacher. So then I started researching more, and I just thought there must be more. There's things of this that they couldn't explain beyond experience. So I was very heady with it. I was trying to use my rational mind, trying to make sense. I was looking for these answers of no, give it to me black and white. Now, how did this happen? So I kept studying with different teachers, looking for these answers that later I realized I wasn't going to really understand until I allowed myself to experience it and start focusing on just my practice and really stop dismissing what I actually felt and what I actually experienced. So that's how I just went down the rabbit hole of curiosity. I was genuinely curious, and I became more curious about us and what we are and what we're capable of and what this all meant. And that's how it all started, and I just never looked back.
Wow. Okay, so I'm glad that you talked about your experiences of skepticism, because I think you probably assessed from my email that that's my first response as well. So I'm glad you're not hugely offended by the fact that I'm wait a minute, what the heck is going on here? But I'm keeping an open mind here.
Yeah.
So let's talk about the session between you and I, because I have to admit your assessment was pretty accurate. I didn't feel a lot happening during the session. I had a little bit of itching and tingling and random itches all over my body, my finger would really itch.
Yeah.
But before we kind of get into that, explain the setup to the audience. And then what exactly did you do to gain the insights that you shared with me? And by the way, feel free to share kind of anything you said to me or anything that you found. I don't really keep secrets from the audience so much. So,
okay, where do I start with that? So the setup to conduct a Reiki session, period, is on the practitioner side, very meditative. I mean, it's really literally like you go into this meditative state and you really become the observer of energy. So basically, when someone says they're doing Reiki, the best way I can describe it is you're channeling this universal life force energy, and you can feel this energy throughout your body. But if you were in person, I would feel it through my hands and these different sensations through my hands. So it feels like this concentrated, higher amounts of energy moving through you. When I'm doing a distance session, the same thing. I go into this meditative state. And like I said, in Reiki level 2, you work with these Reiki symbols that also hold energetic vibration. But I guess to explain it to someone who's not experienced it, it feels like if you saw me, I'm sitting in lotus position, pillow on my lap, and I'm using the pillow kind of as a proxy of you or whomever I'm doing Reiki for. And I go into this meditative state and I intend really to connect with you energetically. And I start to feel this energetic connection and flow of energy between the two of us. And then it's just really a matter of trying to stay in that mode of observation and not trying to do anything, because I'm just observing the movement of your life force and your energy. Now, one thing I will say is with Reiki, it's not that every session someone will necessarily have messages for you. And even when this started for me, I would see things. I started putting my hands on people and I would feel energetic sensations similar to what you described feeling. I would feel tingling sensations, or I would feel heat, or I would feel just like something that felt staticky. Or as it progressed, I started to see colors and I would see things, but I didn't know how to translate it. So it was like I was having all of these energetic impressions and sensations, but I didn't know what it meant. So because of that, I personally went on to study intuitive development just so that I could learn how to translate what I was sensing and feeling during Reiki sessions.
Wow. Okay. So I do have to admit, like I said, your assessments were pretty spot on. Mm-hmm. You talked to me about internal conflict in my heart regarding love and romance, and this realization that that's one of those things in life that can't be hacked like everything else. You also talked to me about this conflict between scaling my business versus focusing on other priorities. You mentioned a few other things, coming to terms with big, scary questions in life and dietary changes. All that stuff is accurate. But I do have to say that all that stuff is stuff that I've talked about before, in episodes with Alex Sharfin or Dr. Dan Engel or Drew Knoll. So I have to ask, level with me. Did you listen to any of those episodes before preparing for our session?
I did not listen to those episodes. I did, however, listen to an episode with you and the man who spoke about Taoism and acupuncture.
Oh, cool.
So when I got your email, I actually, quite honestly, let me back up even before that. I was in a meditation the day when I sent you the email and said, would you like a session? I was in a meditation and you popped in mind, and I had this feeling of, this would probably be a better conversation if he actually had the experience of a session. And there was a part of me that was like a little hesitant around that, like, oh, and then we're going to talk about this, so publicly, you know what I mean? Like I understood that I was really putting myself out there. But on the other hand, too, I knew that, I believe in this because of my experience. And again, I think it's a very important conversation to have because I think it opens us up to question more about what we are and what we're capable of. So that's why I even offered it. Respect. Yeah. Anyway, so when I got your email, quite honestly, like my heart was like, oh my gosh, like no, And then I thought, it was kind of comical because I would think the same thing, but
I'm so glad you said that.
Yeah, no, it's true. When I first got the email from you, even about the show, I was so curious about the show just from the title of it. So, of course, I went to the podcast listing and looked at what the show topics were. But I was more interested in hearing you and what your interest was around energy work. So I was drawn to listening to the episode about the Taoism and that type of thing. And I saw that you had a lot, it seemed like several things about superfoods or things like this. But honestly, for me, I'm not drawn to that only because I have so many allergies to raw foods, raw vegetables, raw fruits, almonds, everything.
Wow.
So I just, like that stuff normally doesn't help me. Yeah, I know.
So I was talking to my mentor about this today. And I was like, I really don't know what to do. Like, I'm going to level with you completely, Yolanda. I was like, I don't want to accuse her because this could be the real deal, but I also am spooked by this, right? She's like, well, what if it's not either or? What if it's both? Like, what if she knows a little bit about you and that helped inform her reading and allowed her to gain deeper clarity through the Reiki? And I was like, So it sounds like a little bit of that. Like you kind of, you knew my vibe a little bit and then were able to hone in maybe a little bit deeper than I would have expected because of that.
Well, there's two parts to that. One, I would say it's actually, to me, in my experience, it's harder to read people when you know too much because then your mind gets in the way. And so, like, for example, I hate when my mom tells me, to connect to her and look at her space because it really forces you to stay out of what you think you know about the person and just allow information to come through. So it's always easier, I think, to go in without knowing anything because then you just, whatever comes up and there's nothing you can do about it. And there was something else she said. Oh, knowing about you. Yeah. Being informed about you. That was actually something that was a hesitation for me because I saw that you did have a lot of information about, foods or health or, what we ingest. So when something came up in your space and it looked like almost like it didn't seem like it was something that was just easy going for you. Like, yeah, I've got my diet down and I'm good and I'm healthy. It seemed like more of this question of like, oh, wait a minute, you have a lot of information, but really it's going to be more beneficial to you to pay attention to your body. I actually question that more because looking at how much you seem to talk about this, I would think that wouldn't be a question for you. Do you see what I mean?
Totally.
So when that came up, I was kind of like, oh, that's interesting. But I always just put it out there. Whatever comes up, it doesn't have to make sense to me because it's not about me.
Totally. And that's fair. And I think the issue with the diet right now is twofold. One, I've switched to all my produce now comes automatically in one of these like organic boxes. And I used to be on a keto diet, so basically no carbohydrates. And inevitably what ends up coming a lot of the time is potatoes and sweet potatoes and Jerusalem artichokes and like carby, starchy foods. And so I'm kind of experimenting with that. And I think that's probably a little bit of what you picked up. And also experimenting with this idea of like, okay, I know that I should never have wheat and stuff like that. But right now, it's Hanukkah. And so it's all about the jelly donuts where I live. And I'm just thinking to myself, like, the optimal health versus like a little bit of suffering and feeling a little bit sick, but being able to partake in this like very special tradition once a year and toying around with that. Like spot on. And that's something that I haven't talked about too much about, like vacillating and knowing that the paleo diet is the way to go. But asking myself, it's kind of like, once in a while smokers. Like I know personally, I never smoke, but I know a lot of people who are like, I know the risks, but once in a while, I just want a cigarette. And that's kind of how I'm feeling about things like pastries.
Well, this is the thing too. And even as you're saying this, it's coming up now and it makes more sense of even what I saw in your space is, we really are unique in our designs and our bodies are so intelligent. And that's really, one of the things that I've come to realize through the energy work and realizing how intelligent beings we are, our systems, how intelligent they are. So that's why the message was coming through really for you to beyond just what you know or what you've studied about food and what you're ingesting, really paying attention to what you crave and what you sense and how your body responds to different things. Because what may work for someone else isn't going to necessarily be the exact right, optimal, healthy recipe for you. Just like I said about me, everyone says I should eat everything raw. However, they don't understand that for me, it's a terrible situation, and we're all so unique in our design. So you really taking what you know almost as like a foundation and to help you translate what comes up for you when you tune into your body. What is your body asking you for? What do you, when you ingest something, how does it make you feel? Do you notice, does it make you feel more energetic? Is it making you feel heavy? Not just the fact of what we're told it's supposed to do for you, but what it's actually doing just for Jonathan. Do you see what I mean? So that's really what that message was about.
Totally. Okay. You're winning me over because I do think now I'm realizing somehow I was completely cool with the whole idea. I've had people kind of touch me and feel energies and stuff like that. And I try not to get too woo-woo on the show, but I've had some experiences, especially when quote unquote plant medicines are involved, where you can feel electric shocks from people and charges and really intense things.
Yes.
For me, where I got really, really skeptical was the remote kind of distance treatment. And I'm realizing that doesn't necessarily make sense. It's kind of like saying, if I'm going to be skeptical of wireless internet, then I have to be skeptical of wired internet. You know what I'm saying? So I'm realizing that maybe it was, if I'm going to believe in this, I have to believe that it's going to work remotely. But tell me how that works. There are 7.5, almost 8 billion people on the planet. There are 5 million people around me right now. How do you find one person and zone in on them? That's what's really bizarre for me.
To say the least. And there's a couple of things that come to mind with that. One, when I first started practicing distant Reiki, because it's obviously something you have to practice to really connect to. I practiced on my mom, and she lives 3,000 miles away from me. And one of the first times I practiced on her, she had back pain and it went away for her. So I was really excited. And, so that started to take away me being so skeptical of wow, this stuff really can, it can work. But I also had in mind, it's my mom. And, you have a natural closeness to certain people, our parents or whatever, certain people close to you, they know when you're not okay, or you think of someone and then all of a sudden they call. We intuit and we feel each other in so many ways that we don't pay attention to. And this practice really starts to make you go deeper and really start to question how connected are we beyond the physicality? And even when you think about spirituality and the idea of this oneness and us all being, from the same source and all of these things, there's no separation. It really starts to connect you deeper into that idea because you realize oh my God, I really can connect to someone who's not here. Now, how it's done, honestly, like I said, I have no idea. I'm amazed every time I have a session, whether it's distant or in person, every time. You could speak to anyone who's ever worked with me, and after every session, I'm like, oh, that was so amazing. And I've been practicing this for 6 or 7 years now, and it amazes me. So the best way I try to explain it to people of how we can sense energy is, and this goes even it doesn't matter the distance or whatever, but if two people are arguing and you walk into a room and you literally can feel the tension in the room, or you're okay, you're having a great day, then one of your friends calls you and their energy just totally, it could be on the phone, they're not physically there, but their impressions just beat on you and you're like, oh, and then you feel drained and you feel however you feel. We are connected. We do sense each other. When you watch something on TV, if you see something happening to someone, that empathy, that energy, you feel it. We feel each other in so many ways. And in terms of zoning in on you, I can only say again from my experience, it's all intention. And intention is huge in this work. And again, it's one of those things you have to step out of logic.
Right.
You cannot box this stuff into logic because you can't. You have got to allow yourself to experience and just observe and trust and kind of like have like this childlike wonderment, like playfulness with it all. Because it's the only way you're going to make sense of it is through the actual experience of it without dismissing what you experience.
Right. I'm coming to realize that. And you also mentioned that in your email, which further kind of surprised me. Mm-hmm. And lately people have been sending me a lot of articles, some of which I have the time to read and some of which are, hour-long YouTube videos talking about experiments where consciousness affects matter, or where plants supposedly, if an owner of a plant imagines burning the plant,
the plant responds.
Yeah. So this is super weird and super woo-woo-y, but like evidence is starting to mount in my circle of consciousness, if you will. Mm-hmm. What are your thoughts on that?
That's amazing to me. So there's two things. And it's interesting because the podcast that I did hear of you interviewing the man about the Taoism, he actually brought up a movie that I saw in my mid-20s. It was called What the Bleep. And that was the one, I don't know if he spoke about this in particular, but in that movie, What the Bleep Do We Know? It was my first time really hearing about quantum physics and, this type of thing. And there was a man on there named Dr. Emoto, and he did this study with water where he would literally look at the way the molecular structure of water was changed just through the vibration of words. And it wasn't even just speaking the words. He literally just wrote words on water and then would look under a microscope at the water and it would change its structure. And the words that were like love or something like this, the water looked beautiful. And then you have a vibration like hate or something like this. And it really did have an effect on the water. Then there's another movie that came out when I first really started getting into all of this. It was called I Am. Did you see that movie by Tom Shadyac?
I haven't.
Okay, watch that movie. I mean, it's amazing. So he basically he may still be a huge movie director. He did all of those movies with, I can't think of the comedian right now, but whatever. And he had everything in life, wealth, success, all of these things. And he came to a point in life after having a bike accident where he really started to question what was the purpose and meaning of life. Like he had all of this stuff, but he wasn't happy. So he made this movie, this documentary. And in that, there are different aspects of what we're talking about. And one of them was that with the plants, where they literally show the experiment of plants having this consciousness and having a reaction to the energy that is presented to them. So, yeah, I mean, I think it's amazing. And especially with the water, the Dr. Emoto, I mean, that was so intriguing to me because when you think that we are made up of primarily water, I mean, we're water based, and if those types of words and vibrations could affect water, it's like, imagine what that's doing to us.
Right.
And what we expose ourselves to and how we're constantly being affected and transformed and manipulated energetically by what we expose ourselves to.
So I have to admit, I also saw that. And my immediate response was like to look up on Snopes.com and see if it was BS or the research was badly designed. But like the scary thing is there's not a lot debunking that. And maybe someone in the audience will correct me, but like search around for Dr. Emoto debunked or Dr. Emoto BS or like every possible permutation. And there's not a lot, like you would expect it to be really easy to find, but it's not easy to find at all, which is a little bit bizarre and scary to me.
Well, I would even tell you to, you and the people listening to try like an experiment for yourself. This is something that I played with myself in meditation. And, I would say to, when you have an opportunity, go into a meditative state. And when you think about something that maybe is displeasing to you, start to notice where you feel that in your body and notice what your body feels like when you are thinking about something that is, stressful, displeasing, whatever. And then shift your focus and literally just let the word love echo in your mind. Just keep saying love to yourself, even internally. And as you say it and as you breathe and let your life force move through you, let that energy of the word love start to move through you. And I'm telling you, it shifts the way you feel. It does.
Totally.
And it's like, again, like how can we, maybe we can't always make sense of everything logically, but it's true. Our thoughts, our energy, all of these things, it's all interconnected to our physicality and our overall well-being and how we feel and how we experience life itself.
Totally.
So it's definitely something to start questioning and examining for yourself.
Absolutely. And I think, this has come up before on the show, but I think that's why it's such an exciting time to be alive. Because 50 years ago, if you were to sit down and be like, listen, this meditation, like, I think it's making me smarter. I think it's making me calmer. I think it's making me happier. People would be like, you're a freaking whack job. And today we can actually show that the prefrontal cortex grows, cortical gyrification increases, gray matter density. Weird. Like all you have to do is think about your breath for 20 minutes a day and your brain physically transforms. So
now how intelligent are you? Like how intelligent is the body that happens?
Right. And so I guess my biggest, when it comes to woo-woo, my biggest argument in favor is if you showed up in 200 BC with something as simple as a magnet, people would think like this is a trick. This
magic.
This is sleight of hand. It can't really be pulling this piece of metal. And yet today we're just like, yeah, duh. Like, of course it is. And of course meditation works. So maybe that's where things are going with chi. And as quantum mechanics starts to explain bizarre things like.
Right. No, totally. And it is so exciting. And it does. The thing that I love so much about it is the moment you think you do understand something or you think like, oh, I got it. It makes sense. It evolves with you. You really do. It's like the classes and, anyone who's interested in Reiki or energy healing, the classes really are foundational. They're tools, but you literally, it's like the energy itself becomes your teacher and you begin to evolve with the energy itself and how you work with it and what you understand. It's kind of like if you read a book today and then a year from now you had a different awareness or understanding, you could read that same book and get something totally different from it. The same is true with, energy and this work and what we think we understand about it and all of these things. But it's funny to me that you use that example. I used to have a podcast and I actually shared this story before. When I started all of this, one time I was at a meditation retreat thing at the Chopra Center. Deepak Chopra has a center here in San Diego. And so we're sitting in meditation and the person guiding us is literally telling us, be still, focus on the breath, be still. And I, at that time, had never had like an intuitive thing happen to me. So shockingly, I literally heard something say, there's no such thing as stillness. And I open my eyes and look around the room and I'm like, what? And so I close my eyes again. I hear there's no such thing as stillness. And then I start to get this knowing or sensing of even when we have our bodies still, our lungs are still expanding and contracting. Our heart is still beating. Energy is still moving, like nothing stops. There is no stillness, And then my mind started to go into this space about there's no such thing as magic and how everything that we perceive as magical and, oh, it's so strange is really just our lack of understanding about the natural workings of the universe. Right. And just like you said, if we brought someone back like a caveman and turned on a light, they would be amazed and think it was magic. But in this day and age, we understand electricity. So you're absolutely right. It's just one of those things. Again, I think the conversation is so important to have because the more we share our experiences with this, I think the more we will come to understand not just energy, but again, ourselves.
Holy crap. I think you're convincing me. I half expected this interview to go very differently and just be like, I'm sorry, this is too much for me. But literally, I was like, this might be the first interview where I have to be like, I'm really sorry, I can't do this. But walk me through what you saw and felt and experienced this morning. So so I do visualization, right? This is how I can memorize hundreds of pieces of information in a few minutes. Is it like visualization, like you're seeing? Talk to me.
Yeah. Okay. So I will say this, then I'll share very specifically about you. It is really different session to session. I mean, quite honestly, there were some sessions where I connect with a person, whether in person or distant, and it's boring in comparison to other sessions in that like you're literally in this meditative state and it feels very like not much is going on. You're just, you're just there. And then the person may have seen and felt 10,000 things, but on my end, it was very quiet, so to speak. Then there are times where I connect with people and it's very visual. It's almost like this is the way I think of it now after, practicing for so long. Like we're literally walking consciousness and our bodies, our fields, all of this, it's all like we're the storehouse of consciousness. We're like consciousness in motion. And so when you connect with someone, it's like you get to connect into what they hold, whether in thought and feeling, experience, all of these different things, these like pictures and impressions of this person. And again, sometimes it comes through as like visual, sometimes it comes through just as a feeling or like the sense. But in some instances, it is very clear, like it's a very clear story or message or image. And sometimes it's very fragmented. Like, for example, one time in working on a lady, I kept seeing, what do you call those? Peacock feathers. To me, that made no sense. Whatever. I shared it with the woman and it had a very sentimental meaning to her. So that's all that mattered. I mean, whatever. But in connecting with you, I have to say, because it was such a unique experience, knowing that we were going to be talking about it publicly, I really had to go into like deep meditation to step outside of my mind and really allow myself to just, let go and be the observer with you. And when I connect with you, the way that I like to do it, I, focus on my breath, allow myself to completely let go. And I start to just think of your name. And I knew where you were. I mean, generally speaking. So just thinking of your name and where you are in the world. And then I start to get this sense of you, like my impression of what you may look like physically and what this field of energy, this field of consciousness, I get a sense of it around you and I will feel it. So with you very specifically, I right away felt connected to this field of energy that is you. And I was trying to just observe, like almost doing a scan of what I was seeing, but my attention was drawn in right away, like I mentioned in the email, to your heart and to your lower, in your abdomen area, like your sacral solar plexus area. So just to bring my attention to one thing at a time, I then like visually bring my attention to your abdomen area. And again, I'm using a pillow as a proxy. So it's like I'm simultaneously feeling that I am laying my hands on your solar plexus and your sacral area. And I'm just literally observing. And my intention is just that this life force energy is moving through me. And the way that I see it is that you are allowing the balancing of your own energy however you allow it. And so when I had my hands in this lower abdomen part of you, that's where the information was coming up about, really allowing yourself to pay attention to your body. It looked like something that was coming up the way you would imagine like a parasite or something like this, which is why, but for me, it was like a cue of like probiotic, which is why my mind went to that. And that's what I shared in your email. So some things will come through and it's symbolic. So it's actually a lot of whatever comes up, I ask, like, what does that mean? What is that about? And I just trust what comes through. And then I was guided up to your heart space, and the information I shared with you about that is what came through, although it felt very guarded too. So even with that, one thing I'll say, some people, when you connect with them, they are open. Like their energy fields are just open, like, come in, no problem, let me in. Whereas sometimes you have to work with a person a few times for them to really allow you in more deeply, even to say like moving beyond the skepticism for you. So, if we do it again, you may have a different experience because you may be more open because now you know more of what to expect. So it really literally is that. It's like being in a meditation and connecting with someone, and you may have visual impressions, you may have physical sensations. And Reiki aside, I mean, that's one particular practice around energetic connection, but we're already connected. You are energetic. I am. We all are. So I would say, like, even for someone like you, if you wanted to play with this, go into a meditation and breathe yourself into connection with someone you know and notice what comes up for you. Just allow yourself to be an observer and notice if you get any sense of this person's presence, of what they feel like, of just whatever comes up for you. And you may be surprised.
Wow. So that's a really nice segue. Yeah, I want to learn more about this. Say I want to learn to do what you did today, or just I want to understand how this works. It sounds like you've read everything there is to read about this. Where do I start? What books do I read? Who do I train with? How does that work?
Well, one thing I do recommend people go to, especially finding a local teacher, is Reiki.org is a great place to go. Reiki, REIKI.org, because they have a listing of practitioners, globally. And so you can find someone locally. With that, I will say, in the lineage that I've learned, and this is also true of the lineage that's very traditional, the Jikin and Reiki, they don't do distant attunements. And so when you learn Reiki, you get what's called an attunement, and that's to connect you to being able to channel energy in this way. And it's really considered like this sacred kind of, like process between the Reiki teacher and the student. And so it's always done in person. However, nowadays you can look online and people offer distant attunements. Now, I will say, with working with energy and seeing how things can be done remotely, absolutely, I personally believe you can do a distant attunement, but also understanding and experiencing that connection that you have with that process in person. I do personally recommend learning and having an attunement in person if you can.
I think I'm going to do that too. I'm pretty intrigued by this. I've had some interesting experiences, but now I really want to explore this a little bit more.
I would love to hear what your experiences are afterwards.
Yeah, let's definitely keep in touch about it.
Yeah, absolutely.
This is an interesting bit of a journey because I came back from, it's going to sound so cliche when I say this, but I came back from Burning Man really curious about healing. I was in a camp with a lot of healers doing really super interesting and intense stuff. I had some like really interesting experiences myself, like head scratchers. And I think it's all just part of this just like journey of being drawn towards this stuff.
Yeah. And I think it's just we're all going that way. I mean, more and more these conversations are becoming more common. So
absolutely. So Yolanda, I was going to ask about homework. You actually gave a nice piece of homework, which is, do a meditation and observe the breath. Did you want to elaborate on that homework or assign a different piece of homework for this week for the audience?
Yeah. So one of the things with that, going into a meditative state and observing yourself, I think, we weren't taught to do that. So I think a good piece of homework is really allowing yourself to connect with you and acknowledge what you feel, acknowledge what you sense in your body, acknowledge what your body feels like, move your consciousness around and observe your legs, observe your arms, what comes up for you. But just get to know yourself in general and start to question what you see, what you feel, what you sense. So, I mean, in your interactions with people, what you're sensing about them, what you feel, what you sense when you go into different environments, start to question what you feel, or again, what you sense and what that means. How are you even picking these things up? Be curious, and just don't be dismissive of your experiences.
Wow. And Yolanda, where can people learn more and get in touch with you and potentially experience what I experienced today?
I have a website, yewchi.com. It's YEWCHI.com. And even on my site, I have a free webinar that goes into more detail about the history of Reiki and the practice. Cool. So there's a lot of information on my site to help people get to know more about the technique, and there are free guided meditations on there too. So Brilliant. If you have trouble with that.
Brilliant. And Yolanda, last question that we ask every episode, which is, if people take away just one message and they carry it with them for the rest of their lives, what would you hope for that to be?
I would hope that people will become witnesses of themselves. That's what I really, really hope, is that we all start to pay attention to ourselves and to explore ourselves with more curiosity and more trust. But yeah, I mean, really just that, like, start to get to know you. We do so much of ingesting externally and, learning and taking in information outside of ourselves. Like, turn that back in. I really think that one of the best things we can do is get to know us. Yes.
And it reminds me of a very nice quote from a book that otherwise I didn't find to be revolutionary, but it's a quote from Siddhartha, which is that all knowledge comes from outside, but all wisdom comes from within.
Yes. Perfect.
Yolanda, it's been such a pleasure chatting. Thank you so much. And thank you also for the session this morning. It's going to take me a while to process this.
Yeah, well, definitely keep in touch.
I will. And I hope you'll do the same.
I will. Thank you so much for having me.
A pleasure. Take care.
You too.
All right, super friends, that's it for this week's episode. We hope you really, really enjoyed it and learned a ton of applicable stuff that can help you go out there and overcome the impossible. If so, please do us a favor and leave us a review on iTunes or Stitcher or however you found this podcast. In addition to that, we are always looking for great guest posts on the blog or awesome guests right here on the podcast. So if you know somebody, or you are somebody, or you have thought of somebody who would be a great fit for the show or for our blog, please reach out to us either on Twitter or by email. Our email is info@becomingasuperhuman.com. Thanks so much.
Thanks for tuning in to the Becoming Superhuman podcast. For more great skills and strategies, or for links to any of the resources mentioned in this episode, visit www.becomingasuperhuman.com/podcast. We'll see you next time.